Hello and welcome to Wisdom and Productivity, the podcast of Dr. Efraín Martinez. I am a principal in search of wisdom, and I have found productivity to be a great tool for success. Today, I have the great honor of interviewing Dr. Darrin Peppard, who is an author, leadership coach, consultant, and speaker focused on organizational culture and climate and coaching emerging leaders. Dr. Darrin Peppard, who are you?
Good morning. Good morning. So, I I am a traveler of the road to awesome. I am, I'm a husband. I'm a brother. I'm a son, and I'm a guy who is really passionate about leadership. Really passionate about helping leaders be the very best that they can possibly be. And I spent 26 years in public education. I'm a lifelong educator and a lifelong learner. That's who I am.
Awesome. And tell me why the road to awesome. Can you tell us about that background story?
Yeah, of course. So the road to awesome actually began when I was an assistant principal at the high school level, and um, the school that I was at, a wonderful, wonderful place. It's some amazing memories there, but we really kind of had a negative culture, and we were really focused on catching people doing things wrong, and we were good at it, which was unfortunate, but I don't think we really realized it. And we were in a staff meeting one day, and we were discussing what we thought were the two most important issues in education at the time, like the two things that if we could solve this, that'll change everything. And it's kind of a funny story, but we were trying to figure out what we were going to do about hats and cell phones in our school. And finally, somebody raised a hand in the middle of this meeting and said, "Man, Darrin, why does it always have to be about what they do wrong? Why can't it be about what they do right?" And for me, that moment in time represented two roads diverging. I had been on this path, this really easy path that, was catch them doing it wrong, catch them, give them consequences, punishment to gain compliance. But this other road, this let's focus on what they do right, was was certainly a less charted road. Started traveling that road, started showing up at the front door, started being, that person who was just going to bring positive energy every day and try and make a difference in the life of a kid every single day. And that is my road to awesome. I just continue to travel that road every day.
I love that. Why focus on the wrong when we can focus on what they do right? Thank you
Absolutely.
so much. So, can you walk us through your professional trajectory up to this point?
Yeah, of course. So I began as a middle school teacher in Arizona. I spent 5 years teaching eighth grade science. I coached junior high football and basketball. Moved to the high school level and spent 6 years as a high school science teacher. I was a head girls basketball coach. I was the head boys tennis coach. Had a wonderful, wonderful time teaching at the high school level. After 11 years in Arizona, my wife and my daughter and I decided we wanted to go back to our home state, which is Wyoming. And I was fortunate enough to be hired as an assistant principal in Southwest Wyoming. And just I loved being at that. I loved being at that school. I was there 11 total years, two different assistant principal roles, and then I became the high school principal in that same building. And after 11 years, I was ready to make the leap into being a school superintendent, where I spent 4 years as a superintendent in a small rural mountain community in Colorado. Had a wonderful, wonderful time there and learned so much as a superintendent. And then, post COVID, I started noticing that leadership was turning over all over the country. And I knew that early and emerging, leaders were going to need a lot of support. So we went ahead and launched full time into the consultant and leadership coaching work that I do now. We also run a publishing company here too. Road to Awesome is publishing, speaking, and consulting. And now that's what I get to do. I speak in schools and at conferences, and I coach leaders all over the country, and uh, publish books, bringing books by educators for educators to life. And that's where I'm at now. Live in Omaha, Nebraska. And just traveling that road every day, man.
That's awesome. Can let's unpack that road to awesomeness. Why did you decide to become a teacher?
That's a great question. So when I first went to college, I had majored in physical therapy because what I really thought I wanted to do was be a high school athletic trainer. I spent a lot of time in my high school athletic trainer's office as a high school athlete, and just thought, boy, this would be a really great career path. When I got to college, I struggled. I had been that person who just kind of flew under the radar the whole time I was in high school. Really didn't have much of a trajectory, wasn't real clear on what I wanted. And when I got to college, well, nobody was watching. Nobody was, making sure I was going to class. And I'll be honest with you, I ended up, dropping out of college because I just was really struggling. And I went back, started as a business major. That wasn't really the thing either. And a friend of mine asked me to come and help him coach a basketball team. He said, hey, I got asked to coach this team. I really don't know what I'm doing. Can you come and help me? And I went to practice the next day and I was hooked. And it wasn't like high level X's and O's. That's not what hooked me. I mean, this was fifth grade girls. It was not super high level basketball. It was working with kids and I was hooked. I went and saw my counselor at the college and said, hey, here's what I want to do. I want to change my major. And sure enough, with some of the other stuff that I had done, it had me in a relatively decent place to pursue secondary education, specifically biology and chemistry. And that's what put me on the road. I mean, I was hooked on coaching. I wanted to coach. What I found once I got into the classroom was that I love the classroom just as much as I love coaching.
Wow. What lessons did you take from your coaching years into your AP positions?
Oh, patience. You know, everybody, puts a plan together and everybody feels like, hey, this is exactly how things are going to go. And as a coach, you've got your game plan and then the ball goes in the air and all of a sudden things change. You can't always stick to your game plan. You've got to be willing to be flexible and you got to be patient and watch things kind of play out. And what I learned, when I stepped into that assistant principal role, and I guess one thing I didn't share was my primary role as an assistant principal when I first started was discipline and attendance. So, I mean, it was all about, handling, those disciplinary notices that came across my desk and, catching up to kids who weren't necessarily attending class like they should and that kind of stuff. And, you're not going to see results overnight. It's very similar to coaching a team, whether that was, coaching, boys tennis or coaching girls basketball. We don't change overnight. We change slowly over time. And in that role, I kind of had to, take that perspective of, let's not assume that this is going to change immediately. Things are going to take time. You got to continue to, push and invest and be real clear about what you care about and what you're trying to accomplish and that kind of stuff. And that was definitely one of the biggest things I think I took away from that was just don't expect it to change overnight because it won't.
Beautiful. And then you become a principal. Similar questions. What lessons do you take from your AP years into your principalship?
Man, I'll tell you what, this is a great question. Because when I moved from my assistant principal office to my principal office, it was a 40-foot move from one office to the other. It might as well have been 400 miles because the two roles were completely different. And the role that I had been in before becoming the principal was not discipline and attendance anymore. I was in charge of curriculum and instruction. And so in many ways, I was the instructional leader of my school. And when I was hired as the principal, the superintendent said, Darrin, I need you to be the instructional leader of the school. Well, Doc, I already was. And so I'm like, so what does that mean? Does that mean I keep doing everything I've been doing in this AP role and be the principal? And I struggled with balance. And I don't know that there are a lot of lessons from my AP position into the principal position that I was able to lean on, because there were so many things about being a principal that were completely unlike being the AP. I had never managed the budget. I had never managed and led the classified staff. There was just so many pieces, and it was all of the organizational management stuff that at first I really struggled with. It took me some time. I worked with an executive leadership coach starting in my second year, and that made a huge difference for me. But that first year, it was pretty amazing to, now on reflection, see just how far underwater my head was, because I was trying to do it all. And I mean, I know we'll talk about it eventually, but that's like one of the biggest tips I have when I'm coaching leaders now is, you can't do it all. You've got to be willing to trust the people around you. You've got to be willing to, lean into those folks, to support those folks. And as a leader, your primary job is to lead people. And I was just so caught up in the work that I wasn't doing that at first. So, I mean, I don't know that that actually answers your question, because there really weren't any lessons from there that I could carry over. I wish there were, but there weren't.
That's the whole purpose of the show, to know what is your experience and what you went through. So after all that, and you're the principal, you decide, I'm going to become a superintendent. What were at least one or two glows, things that went very well? And what
Yeah.
were some grows, things that, like, experiences that now perhaps are the
Yeah.
lessons that you teach others?
Yeah, it was really interesting transitioning from being a high school principal to being a superintendent. The building where I was the principal, we had about 1,400 students. I had maybe 200 employees in the building, and then I go to the district where I'm a superintendent. We had 425 kids total, K through 12, and 86 employees. So a much, much smaller space. And my belief was, and I was accurate on this, that in that role, even though it was different, that it would be, I guess, a little bit slower paced as opposed to, being at a really big high school. What I discovered was, number one, focusing on the culture of the organization, just like I did as a principal, was really important. And that was my primary driver starting on day one. They say don't come in and make a bunch of changes and that kind of stuff, and that's true, because that can really disrupt the culture as much as anything. And so for me, it was about, let's really, take it all in. Let's learn what the culture of this organization is all about. And let's make sure that we're doing the work that allows everybody that's a part of this organization to feel seen and heard and valued and trusted. And I think that really helped set me up for success in that role. As far as the grows, just simply switching states. There were so many differences between the accountability systems, budgetary systems, just so many things that, I was about 4 hours away from where I had been the principal, and it was a tremendous difference in the two states and in how the two states approached educational funding, as an example. And like I said, with the accountability stuff. So I had a lot of learning to do. I had a lot of networking to do to really build the relationships with the people that I needed to be connected with in order to be successful as a superintendent. One other area that I'll talk about is, as a principal, once I got my feet under myself and really felt like I was now really leading as opposed to just putting out fires, I loved coaching the emerging leaders under me. My assistant principals, my department heads, any of those people who were, walking that same path or starting to walk that same path and were doing internships with us or whatever. I love coaching young leaders. And I thought, stepping into a superintendent role, oh, this is going to give me even more opportunity to coach leaders. Boy, was I wrong. As a superintendent, you just don't have that time. There's so many demands on your schedule that don't even touch like instructional leadership. I really wanted to be an instructional leader, and I was able to a small degree, but with all of the other pieces that go into being a superintendent, I just didn't get to coach the leaders in my district as much as I wanted to. So that was definitely a learning moment as well. And I wish that it would have been different, but that's just the demands of the job.
Makes sense. I transitioned from urban school district where the principal is the CEO to a suburban district where the principal is a manager. And it was very tough for me because it didn't cross my mind to see board meetings, to see and read documents. I just assumed it was going to be the same. Since you moved from
Yeah.
states to working positions, what advice do you have for people who are going to do that leap and transition to other districts, or in your case, to another state? What advice, what lessons learned do you have to share?
Yeah, I think a big part of it is, making sure that you understand policy, making sure that you understand procedure. And like you said, when we make the assumption that, oh, it's this way or it's this way, that's not always going to be the case. There's the old saying, there's, no such thing as a stupid question. And so ask a lot of questions. I spent a lot of time on the phone early on in my superintendency with the Colorado Department of Education, just trying to learn all of the different ins and outs. The other thing too is trust the people around you that have that institutional knowledge. I was really blessed with a human resources and finance director who had been in her position for over 30 years. I mean, when it came to school finance, Martha knew it inside and out, and I really appreciated that about her. Plus, because she had been in the system, like I said, for over 30 years, she carried a ton of institutional knowledge. And so I really leaned into conversations with her. And, when we come into a new role, especially as leaders, I think sometimes we think we are supposed to know it all. And that's just not very realistic. And I think that was, I know that's one of the things I struggled with when I transitioned into being a principal, because I thought that, hey, I got to know it all. I got to be Superman here. I got to solve everybody's problems. I got to do everything for them. When I transitioned into the superintendent role, having gone through that struggle, I didn't make that mistake a second time. It was, yes, I bring a lot of knowledge and a lot of experience, but I also don't know everything that this district has been through. I'm just now jumping into their story. So that would be one thing I would say, is make sure that you really lean into the people who have been there, listen to them, and really value the experiences and that institutional knowledge that they bring to the table, because it can help keep you from, maybe stepping into a trap, or, falling into, a direction that you don't want to go. So yeah, I think that's huge. You're always going to have great people around you. You just got to trust them. You got to listen to them.
Amen. Then you have a successful career, you retire, and instead of being in Hawaii drinking margaritas, you decide, I am going to dedicate my life to consult, to coach, to lecture. Can you tell us about that prequel of the idea of Road to Awesome, and actually establishing something of substance? And what advice do you have for those who are thinking of doing that?
Well, I think, I don't know, it's interesting how the whole thing kind of came about. When I completed my doctorate, you go and you defend your dissertation and all that kind of stuff. I remember thinking, man, I'm never writing anything ever again. I'm done. And within 6 months, I'm like, I think I want to write a book, and started kind of playing around with the concept of writing a book. And at the same time, I had a couple of really good friends, good acquaintances that are in the speaking space, similar to where I am now. That we just had some great conversations with them, and they gave me some advice and said, hey, if you think this is something that you're interested in, here are a couple of simple things you can do. Start speaking at conferences, doing breakout sessions and that kind of stuff. And I did, and I was hooked. I mean, I really enjoyed telling the story of the successes that we had at the high school, the successes we were having in the district where it's leading, and that kind of more into not only completing the first book, but also into um, really starting to support other leaders outside of my district. So I'm still, it was actually my second year as a superintendent when I did my first consulting piece. And I have a good friend that I've known for a long time. And she reached out to me and just said, hey, I have a principal who's kind of struggling a little bit. Is there any chance that you would consider coaching them? And we had a really good conversation. And I'm like, yeah, I'll do that. And put together a pretty simple package. I went and spent a couple of different days through the course of a school year with that person in their in their setting and at their campus. And again, I was hooked. I just really enjoyed watching other leaders grow and being able to just ask really good questions and help them get the clarity they needed in order to be successful. Because Rory Vaden once said, we are uniquely positioned to help the person that we once were. My first year as a high school principal, man, I couldn't get my head above water. I wasn't even breathing through a snorkel, Doc. I was like scuba gear. I was so far underwater. And so being able to help that individual to start to find some success and start to just gain clarity around how do you, as you put it, be the CEO of your campus. How do you really manage all of those expectations and all the things that are asked of you on a daily, weekly, monthly, and yearly basis? Really, I was hooked on it. I'm still hooked on that work because, to me, one of the most important things that we can do in education is provide great leadership so that our teachers can teach and our students can learn. When we don't have great leadership, when we don't have clarity, man, it really causes all kinds of struggles, and those things filter down and they get in the way of teachers teaching and students learning. So being able to just be in that space to support really made a difference for me. Obviously, the pandemic comes, that kind of put everything, on pause. My first book was published during the pandemic, and as we're coming back out of that, that was when the invitations to start speaking started coming a little bit more and a little bit more. We launched our publishing company in my last year as a superintendent because we knew we wanted to be able to transition into this. And, one thing I'll not necessarily correct you on, but maybe redirect is I'm not retired. I have never officially retired. I just consider myself repurposed at this point in time. I'm neither old enough nor wealthy enough to just be sitting on a beach in Hawaii. Although, I'd love to do that. But for me, it's about how do we help all of these new leaders? Because right now, and you know this, you're living it. Every district across the country has seen leadership turnover. We've seen people who have left the profession for a variety of reasons. We talk about a teacher shortage right now, and that's valid. It's very valid, and it's continuing to happen. But it happens for a number of reasons. And one of those reasons that doesn't get examined very often are the number of leaders who have left the space, which means there are a lot of teachers who have now stepped into the leadership spots. And in many cases, they're jumping into those spots a lot faster than how that used to work. It's the leadership pipeline's not empty, but people are moving through it so rapidly that they jump into positions that they're just not yet ready for, and they need support. I was an assistant principal for a handful of years before I became a principal, and I struggled. So leaping right into principalships, going right over some of those other steps that so many others, have taken. I mean, it's not that they're not going to be good at the job. It's that there's so much difference. I mean, the skill set of a principal versus the skill set of a teacher are two completely different things. And just because you were a great teacher doesn't mean you can step right in and be a great principal. It takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of support. It takes a lot of coaching. And that's where, for me, just the more I was seeing it, the more I felt like I can help here. I can make a difference here. And that's when we just decided, hey, we're going to do this full time.
Oh, I love the story of your why. Thank you so much for sharing that. So,
Of course.
Darrin, like in Back to the Future, if you could go back in time to any of the positions that you have held, what would the Darrin of today tell the Darrin of back then?
Oh, I love that question. I would go back to when I was a high school principal. I'll be honest with you. I identify as a recovering high school principal. I mean, to me, it's the greatest job I've ever had. I loved it, but it was also a struggle. And what I would do if I could go back and give myself some advice, I'd go back to year one. In fact, I could take you right to the day. It would be the 5th of July, 2011, the very first day on the job, if you will, as a high school principal, and sitting in my office. I can still see it like I'm there right now. I'm laying out all the job descriptions for the different assistant principals, and I'm thinking, oh, I'm going to change this, I'm going to change this, I'm going to change this. I would just walk in the office and look at myself and say, dude, stop it. Just stop it. There's a great system in place. You don't need to change it right now. You can change it over time, but you're going to change way too much, and it's going to mean you're going to feel like you have to do it all, and you got to stop it. I would tell myself to remember when I sat at that big, long conference table. We've all done it, and I sat in the hot seat with those other 12 people who interviewed me for the principal job, that Darrin Peppard sat in that chair, not Superman. I sat in that chair. And when the phone rang and I was offered the job, they didn't offer Superman the job. They offered me the job. And I'm the one who said yes, not Superman. So don't try to be Superman. That was the trap I fell into that year. I just thought I had to do it all. And man, yeah, I would go back and just tell myself, dude, stop it. They hired Darrin Peppard. Be Darrin Peppard. Learn, grow, trust the systems that are in place. I was only the third principal in that building in 35 years. My predecessor had been in the role 17 years, his predecessor 18 years. There were great systems in place. I just needed to trust the systems, and yeah, I figured it out. But it took a year. So that's what I would do.
Great advice, new principles, and I count myself. You arrive and you think you know more than anything, so you want to change everything, and at the end, you end up doing a mess.
Yeah.
Great advice. Thank you so much. So, Darrin, as you know, reading books is such a luxury. If you will have to gift two books, one fiction and one nonfiction, to a loved one, which ones will be those books be?
So I'll start with the nonfiction. It would be The Energy Bus by John Gordon. That's one of the books that I have probably read. I'm going to say I've at least read that thing 15 times. And, everywhere I go, everywhere I speak, inevitably, that book will come up and I will mention it to people. And, it's one of those books that gives us the opportunity, just the way John Gordon writes, it gives us the opportunity, through story to just really kind of think about, where are we putting our energy? Who are we surrounding ourselves with? And, how do we show up every day? And to me, The Energy Bus just encapsulates that so well. It's just such a brilliant book. a fiction book, I can't give you one. I'll give you a series, and it would be
Sure.
the entire Alex Cross series from James Patterson. I I'm an avid reader. I love reading books, both fiction and nonfiction. But it's every time that a new Alex Cross novel comes out, it's like Christmas morning. I'm just like, yes, I could be in the middle of a book and stop because I'm going to go read the new Alex Cross. So that would be it.
Beautiful. I love. I have read a couple of the Alex Cross books, and it's so intense. I
Yeah.
can only wish I could write like that.
Oh man, he
Beautiful.
just paints such an incredible picture, and I think that's what hooks me with him.
And the consistency of doing it so frequent is just
Yeah. Yeah,
fascinating.
he's a machine.
The talent, the massive amount of talent some people have.
Yeah.
So, Darren, who is or who are your biggest influences?
Well, I mean, I have to start with my wife and my daughter. Those two. I mean, they're the reason I get up in the morning. They're the ones that, just make such a huge difference in my life. And I mean, that's my everything. I'll tell you from a professional perspective. There's a handful of people that have really been big influences on me. I'll start with I'll start with a guy named Eric Lillis, who is he's a superintendent in Arizona at Kingman Academy of Learning Charter School. Eric and I met on day one of New Teacher Day, my very first year teaching, and we've been really great friends, best friends ever since. And he's the person that I still will pick up the phone and, hey, I'm wondering about this, or, he'll give me a phone call and say, hey, I'm kind of struggling with this a little bit, just give me some insight, or, what do you think? The Probably the best thing that I did when I very first started as a principal, me moving from AP into principal meant there was an opening and I had to fill it. And I called Eric and said, look, I know you're in Arizona, I'm in Wyoming. This is probably a little far-fetched, but I've got a position open. I really want you to apply for it. And he did, and we hired him. And having him and his experience, because he'd already been a building level principal, having him there made such a difference for me, because he was very much a, kind of a grounding individual of, okay, hey, let's slow down here, or let's think about this. And that relationship has continued to this day. There's a bunch of others. I mean, I would tell you the whole reason that I'm in the speaking and consulting space is a guy named Steve Bowler, Stand Tall Steve. Met Steve many years ago, and he was the one that kind of reached out to me and said, hey, I know you kind of have an interest in this. How about I help you? He's been a huge help to me. And then just one other that I'll mention, who has been very much a mentor to me in this entire process in the speaking industry and that kind of stuff, is a guy named Tom Cody. Tom has been really huge. Just again, because he's been doing it for a long time, we always benefit from having some type of a mentor. And he is definitely, one of those people who's been a big supporter of mine.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that. We are nothing without our influences. And it's such a key question in the show because we start understanding how people are who they are when we understand
Yeah.
their background story. So all of us at some point have felt that we're not good enough, that we're not smart enough, that that's not for me, that's for others. And psychologists call this imposter syndrome. How do you address imposter syndrome, and what advice do you have?
Man, it's something that we all struggle with, right? We all question, am I really good enough to be in this position, or, am I in over my head, or whatever? I would tell you, what I do, and to this day I do that, and that is, never compare somebody else's middle to your beginning. I think about, just the space that I am currently in and the work that I currently do. There are others who have been in this space longer than me that, their level of success right now is where they are on their path. Where I am is still very much at the beginning of my path. And I remind myself that all the time. I'm not going to compare myself to this person or to that person. I'm going to be the best me that I can be and just continue to work and grind and get better and get better and get better. And, I have no control over anybody else, just myself. And so if I stay focused on me and continue that mantra in my head, don't compare anybody else's middle to your beginning. I think that's huge. And that would be advice I would share with people too is, if you're looking at, a place you want to be in your career, maybe that's, in a leadership career, you want to be a principal and you're not there yet, or, you're early in your career as a principal and you're seeing other principals and the success they're having, or even, in the speaker or consulting space, and that's where you want to be. And maybe you're just starting out or something like that. Don't look at, the most successful people in the space and say, man, I'm only doing this, but they're doing that. Hey, they were at the beginning of the road once too. You got to remember we're all traveling the road and we're all in different places on the road. So again, just don't compare anybody else's middle to your beginning. Just focus on you.
What a great advice. Don't compare someone's middle to your beginning. Beautiful. Great quote. Let's celebrate the Teach Better community.
This podcast is a proud member of the Teach Better Podcast Network. Better today, better tomorrow, and the podcast to get you there. Explore more podcasts at www.teachbetterpodcastnetwork.com. Now let's get back to the episode.
So, Darrin, as you know, being successful includes being on top of our productivity, yet this looks very different to different people. So, can you walk us through your journey of organizing yourself through your, let's say, your AP towards your superintendency, and then your organizational skills as a consultant?
Yeah. Well, I'll go right at year one as a principal because that's when I really discovered how little organizational skill I had and how much I learned once I started working with my coach. When I very first started with a coach, it was amazing. He had been a principal for a long time, and he came to my school, and we met in the parking lot on a Monday, probably, 7:15 in the morning, and we walked in the front door together, and from the front door to the door of my office, I probably had 7 or 8 teachers stop me. Oh, Darrin, I need this. I need this. I need this. I need this. Hey, I got a quick question. Probably 3 or 4 students. Hey, I need to visit with you about this, that kind of thing. My secretary, Darrin, this. My push pin board right outside the door was littered with notes, and I had a group of angry parents waiting. In school leadership, we just call that Monday, right?
Yes.
But by the time I got everything, all the fires put out, I turned around and my coach isn't there. I'm like, what in the world's going on here? What is he doing? And my secretary, Marilyn, said, Tom said he's headed for room 315. Grab a notebook and get yourself down there. And I went down there and he's doing walkthroughs. And I'm like, dude, I don't need anybody to teach me how to do walkthroughs. I know how to do walkthroughs. I'm upstairs putting out fires. What are you doing? And he pulled me aside and he's like, you need to stop being a firefighter and you need to start being a leader. And you have to focus on what's going to make a difference. You are supposed to lead the building. And if you're going to do that, you've got to get in classrooms. And I remember thinking, well, yeah, but there's so much other stuff that I have to do. And that's when I discovered, holy cow, I have no systems in place to actually manage my time, to help me be focused on what needs to happen. And so here are a few of those things that really made a difference that I learned from my coach. And this is now what I really help leaders with when I'm coaching them Number one, it starts with your calendar. If you have clarity about what really matters, and you've got to have clarity, then your calendar should reflect it. If you're not sure where your priorities are, just go back and look at your calendar. Look at the last month on your calendar. Look at the last 2 months on your calendar. Where are you actually spending your time? Are you spending it on what you believe to be important, or is all that other crap getting in your way? So really, take control of the calendar and empower your secretary. My secretary, an amazing woman, but I really wasn't asking much of her. And she wanted to do so much more. She wanted to help me be successful. And so working with my coach, Marilyn and I developed some systems. Number one, she had complete control of my email. So we all get 40 or 50 emails a day that we probably don't need to answer, or they're aimed in the wrong direction. You get an email, I'm sure you do too, from a parent who, my kid got a 0 in this class. And have you talked to the teacher yet? But that's a time suck for us. Marilyn was empowered to answer a lot of those emails on my behalf. I would walk in the hallways and, during a passing period, I couldn't get down the hallway without, almost every teacher wanting to talk to me. We developed a simple system around the calendar there, and it was just this. Hey, email Marilyn. She'll get you on my calendar. I'll come to you, and it was wonderful because number one, teachers felt, seen, heard, valued, and trusted. And number two, again, she was empowered to do that work, So giving her complete control of my calendar and my email was massive. I also started putting on my calendar 30 minutes, certain times a day, usually at the end of the day, to actually sit down and do email. It's so easy with these things, right? To have an email pop up and, I'm going to respond to that right now. When you were in a classroom, no. If I know I'm going to answer my emails at 3:15 today, I'll just let it sit. It's okay. I can put that to the back of my mind and let it stay there and actually be, focused in the moment of what I'm trying to do. Another piece for me, again, clarity. Clarity is so important. I was able to really get to a point working with my coach where I knew what the 6 most important things were to me. And then I would actually schedule time for myself to check in on myself. And I call it balcony level leadership because I would physically go stand on the balcony above the basketball arena. Again, I was a coach. As a coach, we'd watch video all the time. What are we doing well here? What are we doing well here? How can I adjust here? What do I need to focus on in practice? It's the same thing as a leader. I didn't have any actual video, but I would go stand and look at the basketball floor. And in my own mind, I could place those 6 things on the floor. And I just check in on myself. How am I doing here? Am I really focusing on culture and climate? Because that's huge for me. Am I really putting in the time that I need? Am I really focusing on empowering student voice? Am I really doing that? How am I doing that here? Can I get a little bit better here? How am I currently telling the story in my school? Am I really focusing on that? Am I leading as a coach? Those types of things. In fact, just a quick aside on that. The first time I did it, I'm standing in the arena, in the balcony, and a couple of kids walk by, and I'm like talking to myself because I'm thinking out loud because that's what I do. And my kids are like, "Oh, what is wrong with you? You okay?" And I know I had teachers who were like, "What is going on?" Even my secretary's like, "Darrin, what are you doing?" But when I explained to her what I was doing, she's like, "Oh my gosh, that's huge. That just became like gold time," and she would protect that time. And she even a couple of times I would see balcony on my calendar and I didn't put it there. And she's like, "You need to get over to the balcony. You are losing sight. You're too far in the weeds. Get over on the balcony." And just all of those types of things, remembering that, as you said it so very well, you're the CEO of your organization. If you get way too far into one place, a lot of other parts are going to suffer, So I think that helped me understand that, as a leader, sometimes I'm going to lead from the front, sometimes I'm going to lead from the middle, sometimes I'm going to lead from the back. And just really focus on how you use your time, because that's so critical. Time management is, there's tons of research to support this. Time management is the number one struggle for early career leaders, because we just can't figure out how do I do it all? Don't. You don't do it all. You got to trust the people around you.
Beautiful. What a great advice that it should be in all schools of education for people who want to be administrators. I did struggle with that a lot. We all know that being in the classrooms is a key component of being a principal, but often we don't talk about the actual practice of being in the classroom and taking notes and giving feedback in a way that will make teachers want to make an improvement instead of feeling that they are bad teachers and you're just criticizing them. What advice do you have for principals of what happens when you get into the classroom? How do you take
Yeah.
notes? What advice do you have to share?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. Well, I'll start with this. When you're going into classrooms and you're doing walkthroughs, if you're carrying a walkie-talkie, turn it off. Just turn it off. Simply put, the first time that thing squeaks, everybody's going to look at it, and it says, whatever it says, but what it says to the teacher is, you're not my top priority. I'm waiting for a fire. Turn it off. Just be focused. That, to me, that's the most important thing. The second thing is, again, it's kind of back to the Superman thing. You don't have to solve all the problems for that teacher in the classroom. Just look for little things. Be essentially that third point perspective for them in the classroom. They're there to teach. The students are there to learn. You're an observer. Just simply give them some feedback. Ask good questions. Instead of saying, you should be using this strategy or you should do this, ask, hey, I noticed, during the lesson that, you paused, you had your students work collaboratively. Talk to me about why you use that strategy, because I think it's really powerful. We have this tendency, and it's human nature, to focus on the things that don't go well when there's so many things that are going well. And, as a coach, the last thing I would want to do is put a game plan together where it's all about the things we're not good at. I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that we are playing to our strengths. As a principal, you want your teachers playing to their strengths. But if all we do is talk about what they don't do well, how are they supposed to know what their strengths are? I had a conversation with somebody recently, and we were talking about this exact same thing. And it's, when you ask teachers, what are you good at? A lot of times they can't tell you. They can't, because they're never told. So yes, there is a need for, hey, let's think about this, or, we might try this strategy with classroom management or something like that, but you've really got to help them play to their strengths. And so, as far as, taking notes or whatever, look for those positives, because they're there. And don't just go in looking for, well, why aren't you using this? This is our new initiative. Why aren't you using that? Well, maybe it doesn't apply there. Actually give them feedback on what's going well. Maybe there is something that you can say, hey, let's try this. But I think it's really important to focus on the good things that are happening in classrooms.
Beautiful. Let me add one more spice to that question. So we all school principals have to manage the continuous feedback that we provide teachers that is informal, with the actual formal evaluation that might make the difference between someone getting tenure or not. And sometimes when we have to evaluate a teacher that is just not making the cut or not meeting the needs of the rubric, we have a lot of difficulty because when we are sharing all this positive stuff, and then you have to like it is such a struggle that sometimes At least I personally feel, oh, I wish we didn't have to go through that because it ruins sometimes the relationship with the teacher. What advice do you have on how to address that real life issue?
That's such a good question because that's something I struggled with too. Um, we as educators, I think we want to see everybody be successful, and sometimes as a result, we sugarcoat things. We're not as direct as we need to be. And I think there's this really difficult balance between, what's on the rubric and, what's in the individual's heart. You got to be honest. I mean, that's the truth. But you have to, you said the word, I mean, it's relationships. You have to be able to lean into that relationship and do everything you can from the very beginning to build a relationship of trust, a culture of trust, where when you are having those difficult conversations, it's a little bit easier because they already have that level of trust. If that trust doesn't exist, it's not going to come across good no matter how you say it or what you say. So be honest, but also make sure you have your documentation in order. Make sure that you have, good, clear evidence that what you're saying about this individual, you can actually defend it. It can't simply be, I'm fed up with this teacher. This is what we're going to do. That will never stand up. It just flat won't. So, definitely approach things with a coaching philosophy in mind, but make sure you're documenting it all the way through the process. That, hey, we had a conversation on this date. This is what we talked about. I suggested that you use this. Haven't seen evidence of that. I've been back in 3 different times. Haven't seen evidence of that. And then ask them, what evidence do you have from times maybe I haven't been there? Most likely, they probably don't have any of that evidence that, yeah, I have been trying that. Yes, I have, been working on whatever specific thing that you as the administrator have asked them to do. But yeah, you got to make sure you have your facts straight. But yeah, you have to be honest. And it's hard. That's why they call them hard conversations, because they are hard. But as the leader of your school, you have to be willing to have those tough conversations.
Amen. Another productivity question. At the end of the week, or at least once a month, principals send these newsletters home. And, those messages have to perhaps have a mixture of things that parents need to know and kind of inspirational. What advice do you have for principals who at some point during the week have to sit down and actually write something to the families?
So here's where I'm going to go against probably everything I've said, but this is a great tool. When you're out and about, when you're in your classrooms, open your notes app or whatever and just jot some notes down. You see something good happening, jot it down. Then you're not, sitting there at the end of the week going, oh, what do I want to write about? What do I want to share? Just jot those things down. When I was a principal, I blogged as a principal, to share, here are the things that are happening. And, sometimes there are those topics that parents just don't really understand them. School accountability, a great example. Share that kind of stuff. Look at it as an opportunity to, one, share the positives that are happening, but also here's an opportunity to educate, my community. You're a teacher at heart, be a teacher, teach them about some of the things that maybe they're not as well informed about. If you don't like how people talk about a certain topic, educate them around it. Use that platform as your chance to let people know, hey, this is actually how school accountability works. I think I did a blog series, like 5 or 6 blogs long, everything to do with the state accountability model. I happened to sit on the state accountability team, so I really knew it well. But people would talk about, well, the other school in the county, they're doing this, and why isn't this? And here's why. Here's how everything goes into that. And people started to understand it a little bit better. I mean, it's your narrative. You have to decide what narrative you want to tell.
Beautiful. Great advice. This is a masterclass. So at some point you decide to write books. Uh, what advice do you have when actually getting that idea into fruition and into a product in terms of organizing yourself, how to,
Yeah.
or, like what is the writing book
Mm-hmm.
experience advice do you have?
So when I wrote my book, my first book, I I use note cards, just 3x5, 4x6 note cards. I have a bunch of those like recipe boxes, that you put the cards
Mm-hmm,
in.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And what I did, and it started with speaking, and it translated into how I wrote that book. Every note card is a story, or it's a piece of content, or it's a point that I want to get to, or it's a quote or whatever. And when I lay out a speech, when I lay out a book, I just start laying out those note cards. Actually, when I wrote the first book, I took painter's tape and I taped it up backwards on. I had this big, huge wall in my house in Colorado, and just put a bunch of strips of tape vertically. And then I just started taking my note cards and started like sticking them up. Like, okay, this story will fit here, and then this will go here, and this will go here, and okay, this makes some sense here. So essentially, each strip of tape represented a chapter, and I just started putting the stories up there and started organizing it and laying it out. And one piece I guess I should be able to clear about, like a note card that maybe has a story on it. It doesn't have the whole story. It has kind of what I would title the story and a couple bullet points. Then if I'm ready to write that story, I'd take it off the wall, sit down, write it out, go put it back. To me, it was just a really easy organizational system that allowed me to go from, I got all these ideas in my head to, okay, here's how I actually start to put it into the computer. When I first started writing, man, I'll tell you what, I've probably got, I don't know, 8 or 10 start-stop versions of my first book in my computer because I just thought, oh, sit down and compose. No, that's not how it works. That is not how it works. Yeah, develop some kind of system. Like I said, for me, it was the note cards. I still use the note cards. When I did my new book, it was right back to the note cards. Here's how we're going to do that.
Wow, and Robert Greene and Holiday use the note card system. It seems so daunting, but it makes sense, right? Because it helps you
Yeah,
organize your brain and focus in that
yeah,
story to give sequence to your books.
yeah. Well, and,
Beautiful.
and I'm a guy who is not, I mean, still, I mean, I can tell stories about organization, but I'm not type A. I'm as far from type A as they come. So I need those types of systems in order to be successful. There probably are people who could just sit down at the computer and just boom, just compose and just blast out a book. I'm not one of those people. I need to have that something to keep me organized.
That's awesome. Uh, and what advice do you have, or your experience when you had to design a keynote or a breakout presentation? What lessons have you learned with time?
Well, it's right back to the exact same thing with how I write the book is using that note card system. And to me, I think, and this is true of a book, but definitely in a speech, I think there's 3 things that you want to accomplish if you're going to have a great speech, something that's going to be memorable, whether it's a breakout or a keynote or whatever. And number 1 is make people think. There's make sure you've got 1 or 2 points in there that really make people think. Number 2, touch their heart. We get so caught up, I think, in speaking and in book writing about, the content or I thought there had to be some magic formula in leadership, for my book to be good. No, people want to hear your stories. That's what they want to hear. Those are the things that invoke the senses, not, oh, well, this piece of content. I mean, yes, that stuff's important, but there's a story that goes with it. So that's number 2 is touch their heart. There's got to be a story that can touch their heart. And then number 3 is make them do something. Like move your audience to motion. Like, okay, I'm inspired by what you just said. I'm going to go put this in motion. I'm going to go do this one thing, whether it's, hey, it's something exactly that Darrin said, or when Darrin said something, it made me think of, oh, I could do this at my school. Make them go do it. If you can do those three things, you got something good.
You got it. Great advice. And Darrin, you decided to create a podcast. What lessons have you learned through this journey of podcasting?
Man, I'll tell you what, I love podcasting. I'm addicted to it. So the podcast is leaning into leadership. And when I first started, I really thought that, it was mostly going to be me doing solo episodes, and occasionally I would have a guest. I really don't do solo episodes anymore because I love the conversation that I get to have with my guests. There's just such brilliant things that everybody brings to the table, and I just get to, have a front row seat.
Yes.
There's a lot that goes into podcasting, and a lot of things that, that I've learned along the way. It's like anything else. It's a relationship building, type of thing. The more relationships that you build, the more successful you're going to be in that particular space. I've learned from a lot of great people. I mean, you ran the Teach Better Podcast Network promo there in the middle of the episode. I'm part of the Teach Better Podcast Network as well. And, learning from people like Josh Stamper and, from Jeff Gargas and, a whole lot of other wonderful podcasters in our group. That's been a big piece, is learn from others and enjoy it. If you're not having fun doing it, then why are you doing it? It's a great opportunity to just share really great conversations. And if you're not enjoying that, then don't do it.
Yes. I started with a blog, and every second sentence I was like, no, I meant this. I'm supposed to do that. And I was really disliking it. And I have found with podcasting that I guess this joy of learning from others and just talking, just having a conversation with either myself or someone is such a beautiful artistic journey.
Yeah, it's amazing, and you get to sit down and just have these interesting conversations. My episode that just dropped this morning is with Angela Myers, and where we went with the conversation compared to where I thought we were going to go. And I go unscripted. I don't have a scripted list of questions other than I always ask everybody at the end how they're leaning into leadership. But I just want to kind of let that conversation flow. And just some incredible things happen as a result of that. And for me, I'm better every time I do a podcast interview. I learn something every single time. And okay, so I guess in a selfish way, Doc, it's a way for us to continue to sharpen our own saw.
It's so true. It is so true. Amen. So, Darrin, when the curtains close and Dr. Darrin Peppard takes out his cape, what do you do for fun?
I'm an avid golfer. I am a lousy golfer, but I'm an avid golfer. I love playing golf. That's my number one thing. I love to get out and play golf. Working from home, and my wife does too. She's pretty much the book side of our business is her. We're home with our dogs, so we get our dogs out for walks and that kind of stuff. Love working, in the yard. We actually, when we moved to Omaha, we bought a house that's now 97 years old. And so we're just really enjoying doing some of the kind of the restoration type of work and that kind of thing. We really enjoy doing that. And I'm a Jeep guy. So, being out in the Jeep, it's going to be a beautiful sunny day here. So I'm sure I'll have at least the front tops taken off and, just get out and have a good time rolling down the road in the Jeep, man. That's how that's what I do
Beautiful.
for fun.
Awesome. In the road to awesome. Awesome. Fantastic. I love it. Darrin, this has been such a great conversation. Any last thoughts you would like to share with the listeners and viewers of the show?
I guess I just would reiterate clarity. As a leader, just Really figure out what truly matters to you. What do you truly expect of people? And what do you expect of yourself? And then be intentional. Align your calendar, your words, your actions, how you allocate your time to those things that you really care about. And that's when you'll move from firefighter to leader. To me, that's what it's all about.
Wow. Darrin, it was such a luxury to learn from you. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having me on, man. This was a great way to start my Sunday.
Amen. Have a great Sunday.
You as well.
Thank you for listening to Wisdom and Productivity, the podcast of Dr. Efraín Martinez.
Chulo.
And I love that production. Chill out.